One of the most common scenarios I see with SSIS is when people iterate through a number of flat files and load them into a SQL database. Today I'm going to show you how to migrate that to a fully PaaS solution in Azure and how to use Data Lake for your file storage. In this video, I'm going to go through a couple of prerequisites. I'll give you a quick overview of what the current on-prem SSIS package looks like. I'll give you an overview of the Azure architecture that we are migrating to. Then I will go through setting up the Azure environment with VNets, your logical SQL Server, Azure SQL DB, Azure Data Factory, SSIS Integration Runtime, and Data Lake. Finally, I will go through the build, test, and deployment of the SSIS solution to the Azure PaaS environment. I'm going to assume you have a knowledge of the SSIS Integration Runtime on Azure Data Factory. I'm also going to assume you have a relatively good knowledge of SSIS and you have been using this before. I also will assume you have an understanding of how to deploy SSIS packages via data tools in Visual Studio. And if you're struggling with any of these concepts, if you just watch a video that I made a few months ago, the link is on the screen at the moment, and this should get you up to speed with what you need to know. Let's have a look at the current on-prem architecture for the scenario we're going to go through. Imagine you have a big Windows SQL Server. On there you have your databases, you have SSIS installed, and you also have a file and folder system which you use to pull the flat files from. So this scenario, you'll have a number of files in the source folder. You will use SSIS to iterate through them, loading them into the database, and then moving them into the archive folder. So what will our target architecture in Azure look like? So we will move our databases to Azure SQL Database. We will move SSIS to the SSIS Integration Runtime on Azure Data Factory. All the flat files we need to import, we will move those to Azure Data Lake. And then just for good measure, we are going to wrap this whole solution in a virtual network. Let's have a quick walkthrough of the Azure environment I have already set up. First of all, we have the VNet. If you look at the name, VNet SSIS on ADF, and inside that there is a subnet called default. Let's switch across the portal and have a quick look at that. So this is the subnet. You can see the address space on the right hand side over here. And if we look down at subnets, we can see the default subnet and the address range. Inside the default subnet, we are going to put a logical SQL Server and an Azure SQL DB. The Azure SQL DB is called DB SSIS on ADF. Let's go and have a look at this. Probably important thing to have a look at here is the fact that we have limited access via a firewall. We are not allowing Azure services, and we are only allowing access from within that subnet, within that VNet. Let's have a quick look at the databases as well. There's the one I've just spoken about, and just notice the SSIS DB is on there as well, and we will talk about that in the next slide. Let's have a look at the Azure Data Factory and the SSIS Integration Runtime that we're installing. And let's cut across to the Azure portal. Let's have a look at the Azure Data Factory. And in there, if we go to Author and Monitor, this will open up the web interface. In here, we can go and look at the pre-configured integration runtime. This is it here. Let's just have a look at the settings. First thing, just notice the name, and then there are the other settings which you can configure. Next screen, we're looking at authorization, and the next screen is probably the most important one. As we can see, we have limited access to the VNet and the default subnet in particular, and we are not enabling the other two services. We'll just go back to the main screen, and as you can see, this here is stopped, so we're just going to start it up for our demos. And as you can see, it is now in a state of starting. Lastly, I'm going to show you the data lake I have configured in Azure. I'm just going to cut across to the portal and show this to you. This is our storage account. And the important thing to notice here is we have limited access to the virtual network I showed you in the last slide.
The first thing we're going to do is have a quick demo of the existing on-prem solution that we are looking to migrate. This is based around a for each loop container. It looks down at this file path here and collects a number of flat files and loads them into a database. This is a pop-up box that shows the file name variable. We then go on to a data flow task. This loads the data from the source folder into the database. Next, we use a file system task to move the files from the source folder to the archive folder. Right, let's try this here out. Let's clear out the data, make sure there's nothing there. The tables are empty. We go look in our source folder. We have the 6 files. And let's go have a look at the archive folder. There is nothing in there. We switch back to our package, we give it a run. So here we go. This is the pop-up box with the file name variable. And we iterate through those, loading the files one at a time. Let's switch back, have a look again. Yes, all the data is there, and that's the file row count. And if we have a look at the files, we have the 6 files in the archive folder, and there are none in the source folder. Right, let's start building out our new PaaS solution. First thing we need to do is check we have the SSIS feature pack installed. I'll show you how to do this. We need to set up the package variables. We need to set up a for each loop container. Then we need to set up connectors to the data lake and connectors to the Azure SQL DB. Let's cut across to Visual Studio. This is our solution and our package within the solution. If we look here at this Azure dropdown, if this is grayed out, you will need to install the SSIS feature pack. Search for the SSIS feature pack, click on the link and download it. Next thing we're going to do is set up 3 variables. The first variable will be the file name. And this here will be a string. And let's put in a sample value. Next, we will put in a folder path. And a sample value. Lastly, we will put in an archive file path or archive folder path. This is where we will be archiving the files to after we have loaded them. So this is Azure Storage Explorer. If you don't have this here, I would really recommend downloading it. Once again, you just search for Azure Storage Explorer. And download it from there. It will make your life a lot easier when working with Azure Storage. So this is the storage account we created earlier. If we drill down into the containers, we can see our container. And this file path is the one that we are using in the folder variable. This is the path to the archive folder. So yeah, just look, all the files are there. We're just going to clear the ones out of the archive, as we will be repopulating that later. Right, the next thing we're going to do is create the for each loop container. Let's open that up. And yes, let's look for the Data Lake version of this, the Data Lake enumerator. And here we are going to drop this down, create new connection. This will open up the wizard for the Azure Storage connector. Let's change this here to Data Lake. And we're now going to put in the account name and the account key. You can get these details from the Azure portal, or you can get them from a Storage Explorer. If you highlight the account and you go and copy and paste this connection string into Notepad, and from here you can get both the account name and the key. So I'm just going to chop those up, make it easier to read. I'll get the account name, paste that in. And the key. Right, let's give that a test and OK it. Okay, it all seems to work. OK out of that, and let's just go and give this connector a better name, something like Data Lake. Great, we have the Data Lake connector. Right, let's set up the connector to the Azure SQL DB. That is the name of the logical instance. So let's create that. Let's just go in here and configure, make sure it's going to the correct database. I'm just renaming it to something more intuitive. It's going to have so that's the name of the server, yep, and that's the name of the database we want to connect to, so we'll close that, and I'm just going to remove the full stop I left behind at the end of that name. So we have checked that we have the SSIS feature pack installed. I showed you how to get that if you haven't got it installed already. We've set up the package variables. We've set up the for each loop container. We've set up connectors to the Data Lake and connectors to Azure SQL DB. Next, we are going to configure the for each loop container. We're going to have to check the file variable, and I'll show you a method for doing that. And then we're also going to be fixing the file name variable, as there might be an issue with that. So let's start configuring the for each loop container. If we go to the collection and to expressions, under properties, we go to folder path, and we are going to use an expression to configure this from the variable. So under variables, we're just going to drag down the folder path variable and just evaluate and check, yes, that is what we are expecting. And that matches what. So that will populate this folder path. So next we're going to look at the file variable, and and this here will be populated. So what this for each loop container does, it uses that file path to iterate through the folder. So let's have a look at that folder and retrieve the names of these files. So I'm going to use a scripted task to create a pop-up box which actually shows us the variable value so we can check that is correct. So let's drag a script task across into here. Let's just give it a more intuitive name. And let's configure this pop-up box. So I'll be using C#, and let's feed in the file name variable. Just when the editor opens up, we're just going to put our little bit of C# code in here. And all this here does is it's going to return a pop-up box with the file variable so we can see what it is. Let's OK that and execute the package. So it's got the first variable, and the thing we're noticing here is it's not just got the file name, it's got the folder and file name, and it will make our life a lot easier if we can limit that just to the file name. How are we going to do this? If we go look at our variable, let's make myself a bit more realistic. Our variable here, we can use an expression to strip out the path. So you have a number of options and you can click around and find which one you like, but I'm going to use the replace command. And what this is doing is it will get the file name as it is, and it will replace the folder path with an empty string. So we're just going to test it out, see what we see, and that is what we are hoping for. So let's OK this here and give it another run, and hopefully the pop-up box will show us just the file name now. Great, this is the behavior we're expecting. So you just OK and iterate through these one at a time. So we have configured the for each loop container, we have set up a way of checking the file name variable, and we have fixed that issue we found with the file name variable. Next we're going to finish configuring that for each loop container. Then we are going to configure a file copy and a file delete to archive the files as we process them. Right, let's switch back across to Visual Studio. And we're going to drag in a data flow task. Center that up and connect it to the pop-up box above. And then we are going to drill down into there. And we are going to drag in the new flexible file source. Let's open that up. What we are going to need to configure here is a folder path and a file name. So if we go back out to the data flow task and go to the properties, and across on the right hand side we look to configure some expressions. Click on the aerial box and it should open up here. There we go. We look for the file name. Let's give ourselves a bit more space here so we can see everything. The flexible file source, the folder path, and flexible file source file name, and we are going to configure those with expressions from using our variables. So let's drag in the folder path, check, yeah, that's what we are expecting, and the file name, configure that, and let's drag in the file name variable and evaluate that. Yep, that is what we are expecting. File format, and you will see those variables have now populated the folder path and file name. This, of course, points to this location on the data lake. So if we go back into here and click columns, if there is not an intuitive name, just go back and remember to click this first row has column names. If we go back in there, we will see the column names. Right. Next thing we're going to do is add a derived column, and this here will add the name of the file we are importing into the data stream. So I'll show you how to configure that. Let's just connect that up and go to the variables and drag the file name into the expression. We'll give it a more intuitive name, source file name. Then let's connect everything up to the database. So let's go and find an EDB destination, drag that onto the desktop, and connect that up. If we now drill into here, we can see it is connecting to the DB SSIS on ADF database. And let's have a look, and we were going to connect it to the online sales table. We go look in the actual database. Have a look at the online sales database. Let's have a look at what's in there. So we've got a bit of data in there. So for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to truncate that table. And just check there is, just change that to select star. Should we get everything? Great, and there's no data in there. And let's configure the mappings now. As you open it up, it should auto map, and just make sure source file name is mapped to source file name, because that is the derived column we added in. Let's go back up to the control flow area. So here's our for each loop. We have the pop-up box and the data flow task. So let's give that a whirl. This thing, pop-up box, is going to show us the name of the file we are importing, and it will help us control the iteration through. Right, all 6 files have been imported. So let's go have a look at the data. Correct, the data is all there. Just going to write another SQL statement so we can do a row count by file name, just so we can see how many rows we've imported from each file. Great. Give that a run. So the files have been imported, and that then matches to those files in the source folder. If we go look in the archive, one thing we wanted to do is move file to the archive once it's been processed. Clearly that's not happening. So our next task is going to be to drag a flexible file task on the left-hand side. Yep, there it is, flexible file task. Drag that on and configure it. So let's join that there up. Key thing to notice here, under operations, you have the option of copy and delete, but not move. So we have to do this in 2 stages. So the first stage, we're going to do a copy. Great, let's just put copy at the end of the name. And then if you also notice, the source file folder path name is not populated, and we're going to use expressions to populate those with the variables. So if we look at got our source folder path, our source file name, then our destination folder path, and our destination file name. Right, and let's configure those expressions. So for the source file path, we use the folder path variable, source file name, use the file name variable, destination folder path, we use the archive folder path, and the destination file name, we are going to leave it the same, so we'll use the file name variable again. Go back to the General tab. We're going to configure the source file type. We're going to point that to Azure Storage, the Data Lake connector we configured earlier. There it is. And then for the source and file path, we are just going to we can put anything in there. So let's put full stops, because what will happen once we save this and reopen it, it'll populate from the variables. So destination, we're going to configure to the Data Lake as well. And just put anything in there, otherwise it won't let you save it. OK and save it. So let's OK and save it. And then we will open it up again. And you can see the variables have populated the folder paths and file names. So let's connect that there up. And then let's get another flexible file task across there to do the delete part. Let's put delete in the name. Let's open it up. We're going to change the operation to delete. Obviously, we don't need a source now. And just remember, if you just see the expressions are looking for folder and file path, not destination folder and destination file path. So when you're looking along here, look for folder path and file name. Those are the two variables you want to populate. This is a part some people get confused about, so just make sure you have the mappings correct. And configure the expression. So the folder path will be the folder path because you want to delete the file in the source folder, and the file name will be the file name. Great. Let's OK that. And configure this to point to Azure Storage. And just put full stops in there. Once again, if we OK this here, reopen it, it will populate from the variables. We'll give this a save. And let's have a look at what is in there. In the source, we have the 6 files. In archive, we don't have any. And look at, let's check the database, see what's in there. So let's truncate it and have a look. Right, there's no data in there, as expected. Great, let's run through this package. First thing we'll see is the pop-up box with the name. That's what we expected. Let's OK the second one. Now, before we OK the third one, I'm actually just going to go and look in the folder and see what's there. So we've got the 2 files, 1 and 2, and in the source we've got 3, 4, and 5. So that's what we were expecting to see. And if we have a look in the database, files 1 and 2 are loaded. So let's jump back and load the rest of the files. OK, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We'll switch back and look at the files and folders. Just give that a refresh, and source folder is now empty as expected, and all the files should be in the archive. Yes, they are. And if we look, yep, all 6 files have been loaded. Right, let's look at deploying this SSIS solution to Azure Data Factory. So first thing, the script task with the pop-up box. If this is going to be automated, I don't think we will want that. So I'm going to introduce a project variable. We're going to call it disable pop-up. Disable pop-up box. And just set the data type to Boolean, and we're going to set that to true. Now I'm going to go to properties on that script task and go down to expressions. Configure the disable expression to use that project parameter. Drag it down there. So that is set to true by default, and we are going to OK that. So let's save that. Build the solution, and then deploy the solution. So you have 2 options, the deploy to SSIS on SQL Server, but we are going to choose SSIS on Azure Data Factory. So the SQL Server name you're going to put here is the logical instance where the SSIS DB is. And we're going to use SQL authentication to log in. Click connect, and then look for a path. And I'm going to deploy it in the demo Data Lake folder. I'll keep clicking next and click deploy. Deployed, we can close that, and let's go across to SQL Server Management Studio. Drill down into the folder, just let's give it a refresh, and you will see, there we go. There is the package. Now you can do a lot of things. You can configure, validate from here, just as you would with the on-prem solution. There is the parameter that we introduced. You can also execute it from here. You will notice there are no SQL Server agent jobs. So we're actually going to configure the run from Azure Data Factory itself. So next step is to show you how to schedule an SSIS package using Azure Data Factory. So let's switch across. We're just going to clean everything up, make sure there's no data in there, and make sure the files are in the right place. So yeah, 6 files in the source folder. Close that, and now we switch back to the portal, go into Data Factory, and author and monitor. Here we are going to create a new pipeline. Create a new pipeline, and we've got one called Pipeline 1. Let's give it a more intuitive name. Let me just go and correct my spelling. And next thing, we are going to go into General, find the Execute SSIS package icon and drag that onto the desktop. So you'll notice, depending on what you highlight, the bottom part of the screen changes. So once I highlight the Execute SSIS package, you can see there are parameters that need to be configured here. So we first thing we're going to do is give it a new name. And then I'm going to go to Settings. Have a look at, find your integration runtime we configured. And most of these options are familiar to you if you've been using SSIS for a while. I would recommend clicking refresh to get the latest information from the SSIS DB. So we have the folder called Data Lake Demo. That is our project, and if we drill down one more, we will find the package. There it is. And if we look under SSIS parameters, you can actually see that parameter we set earlier. So you could overwrite that at runtime if required. We're now going to add a trigger. New trigger. This trigger is going to run every minute. And we can OK that. And key thing to do is remember to publish it. And once it's published, the little yellow circle with the 2 in it will disappear. Great, it has successfully been published. If you go into the SSIS catalog, all your normal reports are available for you. This is exactly the same as you would get with the on-prem version. So let's have a look at those. And let's drill down to the report of our particular project. And what we can see is one is running. Give it a bit more time. And then let's have a look and see what data is there. So as you can see, the files have loaded. If we click refresh here, all the files are out of source and will be in the archive. There they are. And you can also go and look and a little bit more and see what has been going on through Azure Data Factory by clicking Monitor. That is the runtime. It's now run twice, as you can see, a minute apart. And that concludes our demonstration. Thank you for watching.